Good evening, Dartmouth Hillel family. I'm Rabbi Seth Linfield, and I proudly serve our students and program as the Michael Steinberg 61 Rabbi and the Executive Director of Hillel at Dartmouth. We welcome back a person whose life story is stitched into the fabric of American diplomacy and Jewish leadership. This is the third year in a row we've had the honor of conducting this conversation. In Jewish practice, that's what we call a chazaka, a custom with nearly the binding power of law. So, Ambassador, this is officially part of Dartmouth Hillel tradition now, to be continued for many more years in health.
Thank you, Rabbi. I'm now a tradition.
Ambassador Moses, and you did ask me to call you Alfred.
Yes.
Starting as a member of the class of 1951, you have shouldered many responsibilities with distinction. Now, everyone is here because they know your biography, so I'm only going to give a few highlights. You have served as special counsel to President Carter, as U.S. Ambassador to Romania under President Clinton, and as special presidential envoy for Cyprus.
Correct.
You played a pivotal role in helping Romanian Jews emigrate to freedom, and you paved the way for Romania to become a democracy. You are also a longtime partner at Covington and Burling. For 19 years as chair of UN Watch in Geneva, you have stood up for human rights worldwide, and as president of the American Jewish Committee, you strengthen Jewish life worldwide. From rescuing communities to preserving treasures like the Codex Sassoon, you serve as a role model for our students today, showing them how to live a life of integrity, dedication, and service.
You're very kind.
I would like to extend, and well-deserved, I would like to extend special thanks for this conversation to Adam Saltzman of the class of 2024 for joining us this evening as moderator, for Dylan Meyer for serving as our technical director, and to Allison Guertin, Dartmouth Hillel's assistant director, who is managing the Zoom control from our studio headquarters in New Hampshire. Here's how this evening will unfold. I'll begin with a colloquy with Ambassador Moses. We'll then open the floor for your questions, which Adam will present. Drop your questions directly in the chat. We'll be gathering them there for the Q&A. After that, Adam and I will switch seats, and he'll conclude this evening's conversation. Ambassador Moses, your wisdom is more relevant than ever. Welcome back.
Thank you, Rabbi.
So as we sit here this evening, between Zoran Mamdani and Tucker Carlson, these are disquieting times for the Jewish community. There's a resurgence of anti-Semitism that almost feels surreal, carried not just by fringe voices, but through mainstream channels and digital spaces. The oldest hatred finds new ways to slip into the conversation, often under the guise of social progress or freedom of speech, but with a darker intent. What does this phenomenon really mean for us?
It's too early to tell. We don't know if it's a passing phenomenon or something that will endure for a number of years. It's quite different from anything that I've experienced, and I've been here since Herbert Hoover. Growing up in the 30s and 40s, anti-Semitism was pretty much exclusively on the right. Jews were active in liberal causes, voted over 80% for Franklin Roosevelt and Harry Truman. There was virtually no anti-Semitism on the left. That's not true today. What's brought it about? In a word, Israel. Not to blame Israel or accuse Israel, but Israel is seen by some on the left, maybe more than some, as being the oppressor. There's a identification with the Palestinians. Part of it is racial, a question of color, disregarding the fact that there are 150,000 Ethiopian Jews in Israel. And part of it is simply an identification with the underdog. I remember President Carter, who was not in any way anti-Semitic, had a sense of identification with the Palestinian Arabs because he saw them as disadvantaged relative to the Israeli Jews. And economically, that's certainly true. So it's too early to say. I don't minimize the danger. I think it's a real threat. I think it's one we have to take very seriously. And dealing with it, we have to be confident of ourselves to be proud Jews. We don't have to agree with everything the government of Israel does, but we should be proud as Jews, as inheritors of a tradition, which is indeed ennobling. And Israel has many sorrows. Over the years, thousands have lost their lives in defense of their country, the Jewish state of Israel. That will continue. We'll see if there's a permanent ceasefire, if Gaza becomes resolved as a geopolitical issue. Will anti-Semitism on the left go down? I think so, but that's not a certainty by any means. So I think we have to be vigilant. We have to understand what the issues are and be able, in our defense for our Jewish heritage and in many ways for the state of Israel, be able to speak clearly, honestly, and proudly. It all starts with the individual. I do not take the threat lightly, but I don't think we should overemphasize it. It's in its early stage. Will it have a middle stage and a latter stage? We hope not, but there's no certainty. So I would say vigilance, but not fright, not fear, and certainly not panic.
Well, that leads into the advice that I ask you each year for three different leaders: President of the United States, the Prime Minister of Israel, and the Student Board President at Hillel.
Well, I'm long on advice. I remember Shimon Peres, who was Prime Minister of Israel, said there are 6 million Jews in Israel who have another 7, 8 million in the diaspora, each of whom comes here and gives me advice, but I'm the Prime Minister. And I remember Harry Truman used to say the same thing. He said there are 2 million people in this country better qualified than I to be president, but I have the job. So I neither have the job as Prime Minister nor as President, nor am I an undergraduate at Dartmouth today. As for President Trump, it's not unlikely, it's impossible he'll ask for my advice. But were he to do so, I would commend him for the Trump peace plan, the 20-point plan. I think it's a superb plan. Implementation will be difficult. It will depend in large part upon his own commitment. The next step is to bring about a permanent ceasefire in Gaza and a plan for rebuilding Gaza. That's going to be difficult. But part of the peace plan, and this would be part of my advice to Prime Minister Netanyahu, he has signed on to the Trump peace plan. His signature is on it. It calls for steps in good faith that are irreversible towards the creation of an independent Palestinian state. I was present when the Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty was signed on the White House lawn. I was present in the White House when Prime Minister Rabin signed the Oslo Accords with Yasser Arafat in the presence of President Clinton. I was not present when the Jordanian-Israel peace treaty was signed in 1995. I was serving in Bucharest, but I certainly remember the event. They didn't come to a happy ending, nor did the early UN partition plans. They were rejected by the Palestinian side. They fell apart with the first Intifada. So we've not had the progress that we all hoped for and some of us expected. But the situation today is different and in some respects more hopeful. Let me explain. For the first time, the plan for resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian issue has the endorsement of important Arab states: United Arab Republic, UAE, Jordan, Egypt, and possibly Saudi Arabia. We'll know more tomorrow when when Mohammed bin Salman meets with President Trump. It's an important occasion tomorrow. And listen to your television, read your newspapers, listen to the analysts. A very important meeting. Mohammed bin Salman will be asking for B-35s. He'll be asking for U.S. support for a nuclear reactor. I hope the president pushes very hard to have Saudi Arabia establish diplomatic relations with Israel and support strongly the resolution of the Palestinian-Israeli problem. Saudi Arabia makes a difference. It's a leading Sunni Arab state. It is the birthplace of the Muhammad faith, the faith of Islam. It is a leader of the Sunni world. If Egypt, Jordan, Arab, UAE, the Emirates, and Saudi Arabia, and perhaps Morocco, all strongly support markers for a Palestinian state, it'll be much more difficult for the Palestinians to go into the rejectionist mood. So my advice to President Trump would be to continue to push ahead with the peace plan. The next two phases are critical. Once the momentum builds, it's easier to continue like a snowball going downhill, but you've got to start the momentum. And that means resolution of the ceasefire, making it permanent in Gaza, and starting to take good faith steps, irreversible creation of a Palestinian state. Now you want my advice to whom else? Netanyahu? Yeah, to Netanyahu, it would be the prime minister would be essentially the same. He signed on to the Trump peace plan, the 20-point plan, which was put together not by the president, but by Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, both of whom are Jewish. He has to follow through on it. It's difficult for him to follow through in support of an individual Palestinian state because he'll lose, in all probability, two members of his coalition, Shimtek and Gever, and his government may fall. For the prime minister, that could be critical because it could expose him to more immediate criminal action. He's in a trial now and has been for years, but he's hoping to survive that. If his government falls, he may see it as being more difficult. But I think for now, the next step is not to come up with the boundaries for a Palestinian state or its composition, but to see if agreement could be reached on a few markers. The markers being, firstly, what will be the Palestinian relationship to the city of Jerusalem? Jordan is the keeper of the holy places, but will there be a Palestinian political presence in Jerusalem, a building or more? Issue one. Issue two, what does the demilitarization of the Palestinian state mean? Can the boundaries, without being defined, be the Armistice Line 67 with swaps? And what does that mean? And how does Israel ensure that the Palestinian state is disarmed, and it's not a threat to Israel? In my view, I'm not an Israeli, but I think about it a great deal. The Palestinians have never been an existential threat, but they could cause an existential threat. They could be the excuse whereby the Iranians attack Israel or other potential enemies of Israel attack in the name of the Palestinians. So to my mind, Israel is never going to be able to relax and see permanent peace until the Palestinian issue is resolved. And that means at a minimum, giving the Palestinians a political horizon, a means other than terrorism to bring about a Palestinian entity west of the Jordan River, but not a military threat to Israel. That's not easy to accomplish. That should be the goal of our president, Prime Minister of Israel. Your third question was?
The third was for the student president of Dartmouth Hillel. Hannah Brooks. She and her fellow student leaders are creating this vibrant and flourishing life on campus while navigating today's campus climate. What advice would you give to Hannah?
Well, my advice to Hannah would be keep going. Be knowledgeable Jews. You know, your religiosity is a personal matter, but be knowledgeable. Rejoice in the heritage which has been given to us. It's a noble heritage. It's a springboard for further thought, for further commitment to a meaningful life. There are conflicts within our tradition. They've always been there. I guess summed up in the syllogism of Hillel. If we're not for ourselves, who will be? If we're only for ourselves, what are we? There's always been the universal particularist. There always will be. At times, the particularist comes to the forefront. Other times, the universalist comes to the forefront. They're always in the balance, on the scale. They're both essential parts of our being. We are Jews, but we're also citizens of the world. And we try to balance those two in a way that'll be meaningful for ourselves as Jews, as proud human beings, but also for the further enlightenment of the world.
So you mentioned Oslo, and you were there at the signing
Yes.
of the Oslo Accords. That was 30 years ago. Reflecting on that time,
It was 1994.
1994. So do you think that that was an opportunity that was wasted, or were there structural impediments that weren't perceived at the time?
It's a very profound question. I have to cast my mind's eye back 31 years. Not so easy. I was not wildly enthusiastic. I thought it was a good piece of paper with zones A, B, and C, with the transition of authority over a period of years, not enumerated, with Zone A being turned over to the Palestinian Authority. At that time, I went to Jericho and saw the green flags and the absence of Israeli soldiers I was accustomed to seeing when I was in Jericho. It hasn't gone much beyond that. It's very much in the balance today. Certainly, a good deal of responsibility for the failure of Oslo rests with the PA, with Yasser Arafat, who I don't believe was ever thoroughly committed. I heard him say on the White House lawn, no, in the back of the White House, on the South Side, this was the end to the conflict, but it wasn't the end to the conflict. After his death, there's been weak leadership. I think Abbas has had some positive influence. There hasn't been terror supported by the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Arabs on the West Bank did not join with Hamas, although Hamas urged them to and the Iranians urged them to. They remain more or less peaceful, and they've been provoked by Jewish settlers in ways that are not becoming to our people, in my view. The Israeli Arabs also did not join in with Hamas, which gives me some hope that in the future, with a structure that recognizes, as the Camp David Accord said, legitimate rights of the Palestinian people, which Menachem Begin signed on to, there can be, over time, a permanent peace. But the answer to your question directly is the outcome from Oslo was a disappointment. Why will it be different this time? As I said, because now it is not just Israel, government of Israel, Palestinian Authority, it's the Arab world, at least the Sunni world, which has come together in support of a resolution. And that, to my mind, is the major plus of the present peace plan. And I give credit for that to Mr. Kushner, Mr. Witkoff.
How critical is normalization of relationships with Saudi Arabia for Israel's security, and what should Israel be prepared to give up to bring that along?
Well, what Israel has to give up is it has to actualize the Trump plan to take meaningful steps that are irreversible towards creation of an independent Palestinian state. That's a big, big move for Israel. And whereas prior to October of 2023, a majority of Israelis supported the notion of an independent Palestinian state with safeguards, that sentiment has shifted. We don't want to forget Hamas is not a foreign force. Hamas is composed of Palestinians. So Israelis see Palestinians as not simply their neighbor down the street or the village one over from where they live, but as Hamas, which threatens the survival of Israel in its own words. As a matter of fact, in actuality, Hamas is not now nor ever was an existential threat. But the relationship between Hamas and forces in Israel is a very complicated one. The present government is not blameless for what occurred in October of 2023. It was allowing money to go from Qatar to Hamas. It saw Hamas as a counterforce to the Palestinian Authority. It saw the Palestinian Authority as the political threat to Israel because it would be the controlling force in an independent Palestinian state. So there's a bit of responsibility, maybe more than a bit, that lies with the present government in Israel. And I think many Israelis see it that way. Oslo did not succeed, but that doesn't mean that the present peace plan is destined to a similar conclusion. I think there's hope.
Do you think that Palestinian statehood is a realistic pathway for peace or the only realistic pathway for peace?
Well, I can't say only. I'm not a mumche. It's the only one that I'm aware of. I don't think the Palestinian-Israeli conflict can be resolved without there being a Palestinian political entity that is not a military threat to Israel or a political threat. That's not easy. You have to remember the time of the Balfour Declaration in 1917, even before I was born. There were 2 million Arabs in Palestine and maybe 80,000 Jews. At the time of independence in 1948, there were 600,000 Jews, but still more than 2 million Arabs. So the Arabs see Palestine as theirs. And I think, were I a Palestinian, I would see the Jewish settlement in Palestine as changing the political and social fabric of the country from predominantly Arab to predominantly Jewish. And I don't think I would welcome it. But the facts are as they are. Do the Native Americans welcome the colonization of what is the United States today? Of course not. But it's a fact. We're not going to reverse history. The Balfour Declaration is a fact. I wouldn't want to it, and I certainly wouldn't advocate any moving away from that. I rejoice in Israel becoming the national home of the Jewish people, or homeland for the Jewish people, to use the Balfour language. I don't think there's anything we need to apologize for, but I think we have to be aware of the considerations on the other side and deal with them in a positive way, which will build and enhance the security of the state of Israel.
More than 45 years ago, President Carter added you to his team to help explain America's approach to Israel's settlement policy. Israel's finance minister, Smotrich, whom you mentioned earlier, recently approved of 30,000 new settlement units across the West Bank.
It's a disaster. I think to be putting Jewish settlements in areas that would end up being in the Palestinian state is a big mistake. They become a hostage to any resolution of the issue. And that's just exactly what Mr. Smotrich wants. It's not a move to resolve the issue. It's a move to inflame the issue.
As you discussed in the Bucharest Diary, which I highly recommend, I've read it cover to cover, you played a pivotal role in helping Romania transition to democracy, paving the way for its membership in NATO and the EU. Do you see any lessons in Romania's transformation that could serve as a model for Gaza's future or even the potential integration of a future Palestinian state into the international community?
Yes and no. It's a typical Jewish answer. When I went to Romania as ambassador, it was just a short time after the fall of the Berlin Wall, the fall of communism in Russia. Romania is overthrowing its communist dictator, Nicolae Ceausescu. And the U.S. was seen as the force that liberated Romania and gave Romania the best chance to integrate it into the West and be a genuine part of Europe, not a stepchild, which it historically been. The situation today is different. But I think you put your finger on a very important issue where the Palestinian-Israeli issue to be resolved and for a Palestinian state to play a constructive role. I think it has to identify with the Western world and with modern forces in the Middle East. It can't be the only country that has good relations with the West. It has to be part of a larger Arab assemblage of states that sees the values, economic, but also political and militarily, and being part of the West. If we can create that situation, then there is that connection, but we're not there yet. Any Palestinian entity in Gaza and the West Bank isn't where Romania was in 1994. What's going to be there in the future? I would hope so. Am I confident it will be? There's no basis for that confidence. There's only the hope, you might say aspiration, that that will come about, but it will require very astute diplomacy on the part of the United States, Western Europe, and also the Palestinians, the Israelis, and the Sunni countries in the Middle East, principally Jordan, UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt.
So a couple of realpolitik questions. The ceasefire agreement requires Hamas to disarm and relinquish control of Gaza.
Right. Well, yes. Not exactly, but that's okay.
From what you've seen from Cyprus and in some of your other experiences, what mechanisms are there to see that come about and to prevent the ceasefire from collapsing? We've looked at how it might continue positively, but what mechanisms are there?
In my view, it depends on the Arab world. We can't do that by ourselves. I don't think we're going to put U.S. forces in Gaza with arms. It would be a mistake in every count, including politically for the president. The pressure has to come from what I call the big four Arab countries. If they're resolute, if they're committed to it, Hamas has no place to go. Israel has to give them safe passage out, but that should be it. Hamas will not go willingly, in my view. They'll only go if they have no alternative. And no alternative means the Arab world has closed the door.
And you mentioned Iran earlier. Do you believe that military strikes alone can permanently dismantle Iran's nuclear ambitions, or is diplomacy necessary also? And I'm asking this to the Dean of Washington's diplomats.
Well, yeah, that's a good question to ask them. Nobody knows the answer to that. I think the Iranian government has been seriously weakened But if there's a change of regime in Iran, which is what you're asking, it has to come from within. And I don't know the situation in Iran well enough to be able to answer your question. There's enough discontent on the part of those who don't adhere to Ayatollah Khamenei's brand of Shiism, those who are economically despoiled, those who don't see a future for Iran in the Middle East or the larger world, those who don't want Iran confined to relationship with Russia, China, and North Korea. I don't know to what extent the Iranian that guard has complete control over both the military scene on the street and the economy, because they've been given very significant positions within the Iranian economy. I don't know to what extent Iran has the capability today to pursue a nuclear option for itself. I've heard arguments on both sides. I don't have independent facts to be able to have a judgment as to which side is correct. But I will say this, it's very much in play. And if we're here next year, and I hope we will be, we'll have a better sense of it.
You recently came back from another visit to Israel. You've been back several times.
Well, I have a home in Israel.
So 2 years later, what does October 7th mean for the Jewish people, both in Israel and in the diaspora?
It's a great tragedy. We lost 1,200 Jews. That's a great tragedy. Could it have been prevented? Absolutely. I think the story will remain open. There's not been an independent inquiry, which is unusual for Israel. The government has tried to cover it over. I don't think that will hold. When you have an independent inquiry, I think it'll be very damaging to the present government. Will the Jewish people sit Shiva for October 7th, be due for the Holocaust? Will there be another show of commemoration? No. It's not 6 million Jews, not wantonly killed gas chambers. It was an action of enormous negative impact on humanity, as I would call it, and certainly for the Jewish people. But we've had tragedies throughout our history. Does it compare with the destruction of the Second Temple? No. Does it compare with some of the pogroms, the time of the Crusaders? Probably no. But Israel has many sorrows. This will certainly be one of those sorrows and will not be forgotten.
2 more questions. We recently partnered at Dartmouth Hillel with the Anu Museum in Tel Aviv, which you're heavily involved with, to host an exhibit at the Roth Center that commemorates October 7th. You gifted the Codex Sassoon, the oldest nearly complete Hebrew Bible dating back to the early 10th century, to the Anu Museum. After it arrived in Israel just days before the October 7th attack, it's finally on public, permanent display for the public. How does it feel to know that this tree of life of Jewish tradition is now accessible to scholars, students, and visitors from around the world?
It feels good. I bought it with that in mind. I wanted to be accessible to the Jewish people, to all people. It's the foundation of the Jewish faith, but also the Jewish people. There'd be no Jewish people without the Tanakh, the 24 books of the Bible. And I think to have it physically present, and will give encouragement and strength to Jewish visitors who I hope will rejoice in their heritage, which is ours. That I was able to facilitate that is, for me personally, not simply an honor. It was a great opportunity and I am the largest, biggest beneficiary of it. I often think that the giver derives more than the recipient. I had the ability financially to do it, and I'm so glad that I had the opportunity to do it.
And finally, I wanted to get a little glimpse, and I'm sure that our participants this evening too, about your secret sauce. Because, that's my New York accent, secret sauce. You're 96 until 120, and
At least.
and you continue, right, we'll ask a little more for inflation, and you continue to shape Jewish life with energy and vision. What has kept you so active and impactful, and what are your hopes and aspirations for the future?
To be here next year with you, with Adam, with the sons and daughters of Dartmouth. I live day to day. Warren Buffett once told me, Alfred, we're in double overtime. Well, now we're in triple overtime. So all I can think about is what I can do today, what I can do tomorrow. And I'm so honored, so pleased, so lucky. We say in Hebrew, yesh li mazal, or yesh mazal li. I have luck. I was born with energy. I was born into a traditional Jewish family. I've been able to live my life, I hope, as a proud American, as a proud Jew. All the rest is just dessert.
Well, thank you for inspiring me, for inspiring our students, our community. We now have questions that have come in from those who are participating with us.
Hey, Adam, go.
All right. Well, as a reminder to all of our amazing people tuning in, feel free to pop any questions in the chat that you want me to ask to the ambassador. So I think the first question that we have is on a micro level, we look at New York City, and a lot of Jews on campus and around the world, and especially in New York, are kind of shaken by the rise of Mamdani. And a really interesting fact is that nearly a third of New York Jewish voters voted actually for Mamdani. So what should Dartmouth Hillel do, and myself as a Dartmouth Hillel alum, to nurture thoughtful, open conversations about Jewish identity and the challenges that these political shifts bring?
Good question. I don't know. I don't think we have had sufficient time to fully understand the Mamdani phenomenon. This is a radical Shiite who has spoken negatively on Israel and on the Jewish people. I don't take it lightly. I don't think you can brush it aside, push it aside by simply saying yes, but he means well for the larger community. He wants to reduce housing costs, transportation costs, food costs. He's going to be able to do any of those things. I have two granddaughters in New York. They're both bat mitzvah. They both voted for Mamdani. I have a daughter who didn't vote because she couldn't vote for Cuomo. She couldn't pull the lever for Mamdani. I think that's true of another of my granddaughters. It's not an easy question to answer. I don't think we can ignore the Mamdani phenomenon. At the same time, we don't want to intensify it. There'll be another election in 26. Let's see who gets elected to the Congress. Mr. Schlossberger to take Mr. Netter's seat. Other pivotal elections. What's going to happen in the city council? Is Mr. Mamdani going to be able to deliver? I think not. But the message that comes to me from the election is the citizens of New York City were fed up with the last two mayors, both of whom were Democrats. Adams turned out to be a disappointment. Ozzie, I think, was a total disappointment. His wife had been a better mayor than he. And they're looking for the political Messiah. That's always part of our being. It has with it a tinge of optimism, which I think is important, even essential. But what it means longer term for the city of New York, for the Jewish world, for the Jewish citizens of New York, it's just too early to say. But I don't disregard it or feel we can just shrug our shoulders and say, oh, well. It isn't oh, well. We always have to be aware of the potential threat to us as a people, to our values, and deal with them in an intelligent way. It doesn't exacerbate the problem, but at the same time doesn't ignore it.
Thank you, Ambassador. So another question that we have is more on the macro scale. So you also are the longstanding chair of UN Watch in Geneva.
Yes.
And you lead the organization's amazing mission to monitor UN and to monitor the United Nations and to promote human rights. So how do you kind of see organizations like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch as they drift further away towards partisanship and even hesitate to investigate egregious abuses by Hamas?
UN Watch is the only human rights organization at the UN that speaks out for Israel when Israel is being unfairly accused of committing actions which violate human rights standards. Amnesty doesn't do it, and no other organization does. Although Amnesty originally had very substantial Jewish support, I suspect has less today. Human Rights Watch was started, its leadership was 100% Jewish. That has changed with time. When you speak of human rights today, leaving aside UN Watch and Freedom House here in Washington, which I also support, the human rights community is not supportive of Israel. Indeed, is very often critical of Israel in ways that are unfair or certainly aren't moderate in their terms or always accurate. And this has manifested itself in various ways. The last year, there's been a major issue before the UN is the objectivity of UNRWA, the UN refugee relief operation in Gaza. That was infiltrated by Hamas. No two ways about it. And some UNRWA employees supported the dreadful action on October 6 and 7. The UN traditionally has had a less than clear-cut view on the Middle East issues. And a majority of countries in the UN today are not friendly to Israel. You've got the entire Muslim bloc, which is significant. The only support for Israel that has held fast up till now has been the United States, Canada, a few of the countries in South America, they go both ways, and Western Europe. Israel has now lost critical countries in Western Europe: Germany, France, England, Italy. So it's a state of play that's very much in action. And thank goodness there's UN Watch. I'm no longer the chair. I stepped down after 19 years when I was, I think, 92. I think the board wisely decided it was time for younger leadership and younger men, anybody other than I.
Thank you, Ambassador. We have a question from a Jack Friedman, one of my close friends. He asked, what advice would you give yourself at age 20, at age 30, and at age 50?
Keep going. Don't slow down. At age 20, I was at Dartmouth. At age 30, I was at Covington Burling practicing law. Age 40, I was a important partner at Covington Burling. Age 50, I was in the White House. I think the advice I would have given and did give myself was, don't stop. Keep doing what you think is important for you, professionally and personally. See what you can contribute for the betterment of humankind. And never say surrender.
I like that. Another question we have is, how should students and others respond to criticism of Israel? How, I guess also more generally, can Israel rectify its image?
Well, I think we should be proud of Israel. Israel is not a perfect country, but no human creation can be perfect, including our own country. But Israel, even under the tensions of today, I think is a more law-abiding, committed country to the values we share. There are always things that can be criticized, but on balance, I think we can and should remain proud of the Jewish state of Israel, and be willing to explain to our friends and those who think otherwise why we have those commitments and why we're correct in our views, correct in the sense of these aren't just emotional responses, they're based on the facts in the world in which we live.
Thank you. I mean, I guess on that note, many students on campus right now are just, if they associate with Israel, they see themselves being labeled as a racist, Zionist, settler colonialist, kind of everything. And you've spent your entire career navigating these incredibly charged conversations. So how do you know when it's worth engaging with someone who are just focusing on labeling versus just disengaging?
Well, if I understood your question, the epithets that are thrown at Jews, at me, others, Zionist, I am a Zionist. A racist, I'm not a racist. And if you're going to call me a racist, I'll challenge you on it. If you call me a Zionist, I am a Zionist in the sense that I believe in the well-being of the Jewish state. I believe any Jew in the world who wants to go to Israel should be welcome in Israel. I don't think Jews around the world have an obligation to emigrate to Israel, but for those to whom living in the Jewish land of Israel would be an important part of their being, they should have the opportunity to do that, and should be welcomed. And they are by the United States, the government of Israel. I don't think that has changed. I'm not very defensive when it comes to my Judaism. I'm proud to be a Jew. I don't feel I have to apologize. And if you have anti-Semitic feelings, that's your problem, not mine. I don't feel I have anything to apologize for, except for the actions of humanity, of which I am part. And that's a responsibility we all share.
Thank you, Ambassador.
So I think this is the time and the perfect metaphor for the work that we do together at Dartmouth Hillel. Adam will come and now sit in this chair, and thank you.
Thank you.
It's such a joy, a delight, a love, and Adam will now.
Erev Tov, Rabbi.
Thank you. Erev Tov.
Okay, Adam, you're on the hot seat.
I'm in the hot seat. I'm scared. Yeah, so I have a few questions.
Sure.
So I think my first question is, again, this idea of Mamdani being elected mayor was so fascinating for me. Ezra Klein does a great podcast on this, in which he pretty much says he won the mayoral election due to social media. And he ran an incredible TikTok campaign, Instagram Reels, and this kind of points back to the question more generally. A lot of Gen Zers today, and a lot of folks that are consuming all of their information, not just about Israel, but about world politics and everything, just from short form videos. How do you approach that?
Oh, goodness, that's way beyond my competence. I've never heard TikTok. Do you hear it or see it?
TikTok is like you scroll, you like it.
I see.
You scroll.
I've never seen TikTok.
Probably for the best.
Yeah, I'm a median neophyte or almost anthrophyte. I'm really not the right person. I'll give you a postulate which I can't prove. I would say a majority of New York City Jews over 90 did not vote for Mandani. So the Mandani phenomenon is your generation, not mine, I think. I've seen the Mandanis, we have our generation, come and go. I hope he goes, but he'll be mayor for 4 years. And we have to deal with it in ways that don't inflame the situation, but which we hope will moderate it. I can't think the way my granddaughters in their 20s think. I've lived 70 years longer than they. I have a different perspective of life. I have different life experiences. And we were all shaped by our experiences. I can only say that based on my life experiences, I don't see Mandani as a plus. Indeed, I see him as a disruptive force, not just vis-a-vis his, or with regard to his Jewish views and Israeli views, but more broadly. I think he will be disruptive of society without bringing about corresponding benefits.
Right. Thank you. And I actually think that relates to your entire career as a diplomat. And so I'm wondering, what is kind of one thing that our generation should know based on your career? Like, what's the most important lesson that was imparted on you that we should know in terms of diplomacy? Now,
Diplomacy.
that to our everyday lives.
Well, I think diplomacy is not an art in of itself. Diplomacy is one aspect of it, life experiences. I think to be an effective ambassador and to be a positive force in society, you've got to be a good listener. You've got to hear and understand the other person's views, and then try to bring about a resolution of whatever the differences may be, or in some cases, even a conflict. I don't think you can simply reiterate your own position without sensitivity to the position of the other person, and shouldn't assume any less sincerity on the other person's part than we credit ourselves with having. Diplomacy is just an extension of civil conduct. I might add that in diplomacy, with different language, but there's a parallel in non-diplomatic life. To be persuasive, you need strength. You don't bring about a positive resolution simply through sensitivity. It's sensitivity combined with strength. That strength can be economic, military, diplomatic, moral. But if you don't have an element of strength in your position, forget it. You're not going to do it by a firm handshake or a sincere smile or a direct look in the eye. You need something more.
Thank you. And then let's end it on a very positive note. So we spoke about a lot of very serious subjects. We learned a lot from what you said. And you are fortunate to have so much wisdom. What is one thing that continues to bring you Jewish joy?
Bring me to what?
Jewish joy.
Well, I rejoice in being part of the Jewish community writ large, Washington, the United States, Israel, the world. I think Judaism has been a positive force in engendering a search for meaning of life on the part of the Jewish community. I think it's created on the basis of both particulars and universal values, the combination of which are essential for the survival and living a positive life. There's no one word I can share with you, but I rejoice every day when I wake up, A, and waking up, and B, and saying to myself that I'm a proud Jew.
That's amazing. So, a couple really fun announcements. Hillel has some new swag. There's the Hillel tote bag, which students get excited because this is awesome. I'm very happy to have the first one. And then there's also Dartmouth College Hillel socks.
Wow.
Look at that.
I'll wear them to bed tonight.
It'll be nice. But I just want to thank the ambassador.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you. I want to thank Rabbi Seth, and I want to thank Hillel at Dartmouth, and I want to thank all of you for tuning in. I wish you a great week, and we'll chat with you next year, Ambassador.
Okay, as we say, Shavua Tov. Have a good week.
Shavua Tov. Thank you.